And we're back. Greetings, everyone. This is Lucian Vâlsan, broadcasting from Cluj-Napoca, Transylvania. As always, alongside with me is here Jon Gunnarsson, broadcasting from Deutschland, and our producer James Huff, making sure everything works just fine, broadcasting from the States. Greetings, Jon.
Good evening and Happy New Year's, everyone.
Happy New Year, everyone. Welcome to the Current Year+3 Anno Trudeau. So, how's been the first 5 days of the current year for you?
It's pretty much the same as the last current year. In terms of the weather, it's been kind of okay. It's been fairly mild winter so far in Germany. Not a lot of snow, not a lot of really cold weather. It's usually just somewhere slightly above freezing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems that at least at the beginning of this year, the winter is all of it in the United States. I mean, it's been very cold in North America, whereas in Europe, most of it anyway. I mean, even in the far north of Sweden, it's been much warmer than usual. Here in Romania as well, it's been slightly above freezing, and in some days, I think it was on January the 2nd, that there were like 19 degrees Celsius during the day. That was quite warm by January standards. Then it quickly dropped back to +3 or +2, but nevertheless, mostly above freezing temperatures. Not much wind, which is usually characteristic for January, and in the cities, no snow at all. In the villages, minuscule amounts. You could basically say there is no winter for the time being.
Yep, and that's pretty good.
Well, here in the States, I'll tell you, it's been nuts. All this global warming has caused us to freeze over here.
Yeah, that wouldn't be particularly be such a bad thing, but before we go to the news, I need to mention this. I read on NBC Chicago, the city came. There is a guy, a Good Samaritan, who was hosting all of the homeless people in his area into his basement and his house, basically, because in Chicago, temperatures went as low as -40 in Celsius. And the city came in and gave him an ultimatum. He said he's no longer allowed to have slumber parties at his house because the sleeping regulations don't allow it. I'm going to introduce this into my next periodic insanity episode once I come back from the trip that I have planned for the next week. But seriously, I mean, in late spring, early summer, I'll be in Chicago. I swear I'm looking up for that city hall official and ask her for an interview. And I'll tell her that it's for a European channel, for a European audience. You just tell us about the beauties of Chicago. And then mid-interview, I'm going to ask her about this, because this is what? I mean, I am under the impression that we are the totalitarian ones in Europe. And, not even back in the Soviet Union, we never had such thing as sleeping regulations. Which is, what? Amazing. Right. A particularly moderate news section, I would say, lengthwise, much shorter than the one in the last show of the previous year. So yeah, let's go to more insanity. Let's get to the news section.
Okay, the first one is from the UK, from the Daily Mail. Man, 26, who was jailed for 4.5 years for rape in 2013, has his conviction quashed on appeal after new Facebook messages emerged to support his side of the story. A 26-year-old man given a 4.5-year jail term when convicted of rape has won an appeal after telling judges that Facebook messages boosted his credibility. Danny Kay was jailed in late 2013 after trial at Derby Crown Court, and jurors heard a woman had accused him raping her in 2012 when she was 20. Kay denied rape and said sex had been consensual and challenged the conviction at a hearing in the Court of Appeal in London in November. He claimed Facebook messages had been found which supported his side of the story. The woman said there had been little contact after sex. Kay said the fresh Facebook evidence showed otherwise, and 3 appeal judges agreed and quashed his conviction. They said in a ruling published on Thursday that the full Facebook message exchange contradict the prosecution case about the frequency of post-sex contact and supported case claim that sex had been consensual. Appeal judges heard that police asked the woman to retrieve Facebook messages she and Mr. K exchanged. 3 pages of messages had been printed. The woman told jurors that she had deleted some messages to free up storage space. Lawyers for Mr. K said deleted messages had been found in an archive folder in his account. They said the retrieved information showed that jurors had been given an edited and misleading picture of the Facebook conversation. Judges said the woman could not be identified. Appeal Judge Mr. Justice Goss said, "We have come to the conclusion that in the case of one word against another, the full Facebook message exchange provides very cogent evidence both in relation to the truthfulness and reliability of the woman and the reliability of Mr. K's account and his truthfulness. This further evidence does raise a reasonable doubt as to whether Mr. K would have been convicted had it been before the jury, thus rendering the conviction unsafe." It comes that the 3 high-profile cases in the past week failed to secure a prosecution. Liam Allen's trial was halted and the case against 25-year-old Isaac Itieri collapsed. And on Thursday, a Tory MP's aide was cleared of rape after crucial evidence was finally disclosed just days before his 2-week trial. Samuel Armstrong, 24, was accused of attacking a young woman when she fell asleep following a night drinking at Parliament. His defense team was understood to have waited up to 9 months for phone and medical records, which his accuser initially refused to hand over to the police. In messages eventually recovered from her phone, she said she had contacted a journalist just hours after the incident to secure a sympathetic write-up, while her medical notes revealed details of the story of mental health issues, including depression and anxiety. That information was not handed over to Mr. Armstrong's defense team until more than a year after the accuser first made the complaint and just days before the trial was due to begin, raising questions over why it took the Met so long to gain the information. A jury at Southwark Crown Court then found Mr. Armstrong not guilty of 2 counts of rape and other offences after a trial.
Yeah, it is indeed a horrible first week of the current year for the Crown Prosecution Service in the United Kingdom. Several cases of rape have collapsed, spectacularly so, thus confirming the worst fears that Mike Buchanan expressed on our show. If you remember when we had Mike Buchanan in 2013, when the current chief of the Crown Prosecution Service, Alison Saunders, was appointed, Mike Buchanan warned at that time that there will be a plethora of cases where individuals with reasonable doubt and also completely innocent men would go to jail just because Alison Saunders wants to see a conviction rate for rape boosted, no matter what. This is one example. The next story will be much more comprehensive. But let's dwell a little bit on this story because, I mean, I don't know, maybe judges should have minimal training on these kinds of things, and the jurors too, because this thing, oh, I deleted some messages to free up storage space. That's not an issue. That's not an issue on Facebook. You know, I'm currently on the process of transitioning out from Facebook, but I've been on Facebook for 10 years. Believe me, the issue of storage space doesn't exist, period. I found now in the process of deleting the entirety of my activity on Facebook, I found messages from 2009, and I found them yesterday. So no, there is no such thing. And you know, I have a lot of friends, Facebook friends, and a huge profile with a bigger reach. So you know, for the average person, the issue of storage space simply doesn't exist. That's a lie right there.
Yeah, and I mean, even if she had deleted them for whatever reason, shouldn't the police be able to get a copy of that from Facebook? I mean, surely if the woman gives her permission for Facebook to restore this kind of data, which they surely have kept, then it shouldn't be a problem to get these deleted messages.
That's not that simple actually, because if you delete something from Facebook, yeah, you can recover it from Facebook itself in a few days. But if it's more than 90 or 180 days, no, not really. I mean,
Okay.
things do get truly deleted from Facebook. It's just not an immediate action. I mean, you click delete today, and by the end of 2018, it will be indeed deleted. It takes a while, but in the end, it is deleted. So there's that. Nevertheless, the thing with the storage space, and also of course the fact that the police then forgot to ask him, because these messages are like blockchain.
Yeah.
They're not stored just in one place. They're stored in all of the servers of Facebook. They're stored on the client's end and on the other client's end. So in the end, they were able to find them on his side of the conversation, because it's very similar with Skype, actually. I mean, with Skype, there are copies of an entire conversation on the computer of every person involved in it. So yeah, amazing. Go ahead.
And from what it sounds like, it seems to be a case of he said, she said, and then just the prosecutors or the said, we're going to prosecute this case because we want more rape convictions, and the judge said, yeah, well, maybe her story sounded a bit more plausible, and therefore we convict him. It's insane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this whole thing that the woman cannot be identified. Why? No, I think she should. I mean, either nobody is anonymous or everyone is anonymous. I actually prefer nobody is anonymous in these cases. No, I want to see her face and her full name. Why not?
Yeah, I mean, in this case, it's not like it's clear that she lied. It's just that from what I'm getting from the story, I don't know about this case, but from what I'm getting from the story is that these conversations throw sufficient doubts on her story to overturn the conviction, so that now there's reasonable doubt about his guilt. It doesn't mean that he's actually innocent, or that it could well be still that the rape occurred. We just can't prove it to the required standard.
Sure, but the portion with I deleted some messages to free up storage space, that's a clear lie.
Yeah.
And where I'm coming from, any lie in a court is a crime in itself. I guess that's no longer the case in the United Kingdom. No, I think her name should be public, because especially considering that his name has already been made public. Yeah, we should know her name and her picture. Why not? And again, it's these kinds of things. He said but plus evidence. She said without evidence.
Yep.
It's pretty much the way things work. But whilst this case can be argued, as you have, that there's only reasonable doubt, we don't know for sure and whatnot, the next one is absolutely terrifying. And it's if I am to believe all the attorneys that I've spoken with in the last several months about this issue, it's rather the norm, not the exception. Hear this out. Barrister reveals how she combed through 40,000 texts until she finally discovered the smoking gun message at 4 a.m. that cleared her client of rape, as she slams the sales culture police for failing to declare them. The clock read 10 p.m. when criminal defense barrister Julia Smart sat down at her kitchen table with a cup of mint tea and opened her laptop to work. Dinner eaten, husband and 3 children in bed, and exhausted after a stressful day in court, the task ahead felt overwhelming. But the fate of one young man accused of rape lay in her hands. It was down to her, as his lawyer, and her alone, to avert a potential miscarriage of justice. Sleep could wait. On the PDF file were 2,500 A4 pages containing 40,000 text messages downloaded by police from the alleged victim's mobile phone to sift through. The next time Julia Smart looked up, it was 4 a.m. Somehow, she'd found the gold dust, the smoking gun, which would prove beyond all doubt Leon Allen's innocence and blow the prosecution case out of the water. I simply couldn't believe what I was seeing. I managed to grab the 3 hours sleep and was straight back in court where I told Liam what I'd found, says Julia, 48. He simply put his head in his hands and cried and said, I can't believe it. Apart from a short text conversation between Liam and the complainant submitted as evidence, the disk downloads hadn't been disclosed to the defense, which the Crown Prosecution Service has had a duty to do until the first day of the trial. I thought, what other messages are there that we don't know about? For Liam's arrest, we'd been told there were no messages between Liam and the complainant, and the material from her phone was just personal girly chat, which was not relevant and therefore couldn't be disclosed to us. All the police had, I was told, was 1 page of Snapchat messages, which were utterly innocuous, so of no value to anyone at all. But nothing, as we all know now, could have been further from the truth. Despite telling the police she didn't like being intimate with men, text and social media messages recovered from the complainant's phone told a different story. In conversations with friends, she discussed fantasies about violent and extreme sex, including being choked during intercourse. In one text to a friend 3 months before her January 2016 complaint to police, she said of sex with Liam, quote, "It wasn't against my will or anything," close quote. Today, undergraduate Liam, 22, is a free man. All 6 charges of rape and 6 charges of sexual assault were dropped following a CPS review of the evidence after Julia successfully halted his trial at Croydon Crown Court by alerting Judge Peter Grower to the existence of the messages. Liam professed his heartfelt thanks to Julia for working so doggedly through the night to clear his name. He had always insisted sex with complainant was consensual and that the troubled woman only went to the police when he ended their relationship after starting at Greenwich University. Had he been convicted, Liam would have faced up to 12 years in jail and would have been placed on the sex offenders register for life. He says he has no choice but to sue the Metropolitan Police, which this week launched an investigation into their handling of the case and the CPS. In the 2 years he was on his bail facing trial, which he described as a terrible form of limbo, I can't explain the mental torture, police were in possession of evidence that completely exonerated him. I don't know if the investigating officer read all the messages or not, but individually and collectively, they demonstrated his innocence, says Julia. There was no crime. He should never have been charged. He went through hell for nothing. I was investigating my own case to prove my own client is an innocent man when, if the police had reviewed them properly, no charges would have been brought. If I had accepted what the police had told me, I scrolled through the first few pages and taken the view it was just all girly chat, I could have been in bed by 11 p.m. I could have said to Liam, well, I can't find anything, let's crack on. But it's cases like these that make you feel sick to the stomach as a defense barrister, knowing that if you don't put in all the hours, often unpaid, you might miss something and an innocent man could go to prison. I knew that within those 40,000 messages of girly chat, there could be something explosive. In 6 hours, I only managed to scale the tip of the iceberg, and the next day I asked the judge for more time, and both Liam and I went through them again to find more, so he was in the position of having to investigate his own case. If we hadn't examined that disk of downloads, it could have been a very different story for Liam. Even worse, there are other men just like him languishing in jail right now. Absolutely, there will be individuals who've had trials where material wasn't disclosed. They may not even know it existed. Julia, a criminal barrister for 24 years, the past 5 with Furnival Chambers, said that between 50 and 75% of her caseload involves defending those accused of sex crimes. This is not the first time I or other barristers have found something. It just happens to be the first time this has been brought out into the open. I don't know if it's because of economics and funding cuts or a mindset in the police that if they have a victim, then that victim needs justice, and the only way to obtain that is to secure a conviction. Julia says non-disclosure is a constant battle for defense barristers, especially in rape and sexual assault cases where the drive to remedy past failings and push up woeful conviction rates has, in her view, created a sales target culture where believing the victim now trumps objective and thorough investigation. She argues that the police and the CPS are, in her experience, failing in their responsibility to investigate every claim objectively and disclose vital evidence which could assist the defense while cherry-picking from material they hold to strengthen the prosecution case. The Director of Public Prosecutions, Alison Saunders, described what happened to Liam as regrettable and said she would like to apologize to all parties involved. Scotland Yard is reviewing hundreds of rape, child abuse, and sexual assault cases after a second prosecution collapsed earlier this week. Julia says she has watched victim-centered justice, first championed by New Labour and now entrenched in the British legal justice system, result in either unfair convictions or the lifelong shame of being publicly accused of rape despite an acquittal. Once a man is accused of a sex crime, it is very difficult to get him out of prison, says Julia. You may not even know if such material exists. If we hadn't found out about that disc, it could have been very different for Liam. Without such evidence, facing a jury, even if the case is weak, can be a lottery. All it takes is a bad jury having a bad day and the young person's life is effectively ruined. The consequences are dire. What happened to Liam Allen is not regrettable, it's absolutely monstrous. It is shocking that there needs to be a root and branch investigation and how we investigate such cases and disclose evidence. This case has had worldwide coverage because we supposedly have the best justice system in the world. But if that's the position, how on earth can we have a Liam Allen and others? These cases are not in isolation. I have ongoing cases which have a frighteningly similar pattern to Liam's, and so do many of my colleagues in chambers. I have had previous cases where material has been disclosed at the 11th hour over something fundamental. I can't talk about the psychology of those who make false accusations, but I do know that once a complaint is made and video evidence is recorded, it is very difficult for a complainant to withdraw their allegations without facing prosecution. The whole thing snowballs. You can't just go to the police station and say, well, I was in a bit of an emotional mess at the time, I want to take it back. The alleged victim is assigned the police support officers. There's no going back. But it's for the police to investigate all the evidence thoroughly and objectively, and I don't want to be that person sat there at 4 a.m. trawling through this material, knowing that if I miss something, there will be a miscarriage of justice. Julia supports Liam's call for anonymity for defendants accused of sex crimes unless proven guilty. She also commends his suggestion that 2 police officers should be assigned to every case, one to investigate the complainant's account and another to investigate the defendants to ensure objectivity, and the senior officer to then review all the evidence. The complainant has anonymity for life, but for Liam, this will be the first thing that comes up whenever his name is Googled, says Julia. It will leave its footprint forever. Some people might argue that those defendant rights should apply to all crimes, but it's the opprobrium and cloud which hangs over sexual offenses to make this an issue. It's almost as if once someone has been accused of rape, you can't look at them in the same way. I know for Liam, his nearest and dearest and all of his friends absolutely supported him, but in the minds of the public, this special category of offenses is different. Other offenses don't hang over you like that. As for Julia, from the moment she first met Liam Allen at his first Crown Court appearance, where he felt the dock in tears, she has never doubted his innocence. He's a lovely young man, very genuine and respectful. When all the charges were dropped, he asked me, am I allowed to give you a hug? And I said, of course you are. When I took the case, I defended Liam as if he were my own son, because if this can happen to him, it can happen to anyone. So, yeah, this one is a story with a happy end, but as the attorney rightfully points out, most of them don't. Most of them don't have a happy end.
Yeah, so, it's really tough, and it's just that there's this perception in the public that rape is just this horrible crime that where not even innocence is a defense, basically.
Yeah.
So if you're accused of that, good luck to you, because you're going to need it.
Yeah. Yeah, and most of these practices, again, they're very new. It's not something that has been going on in Britain for the last 100 years or something. No. It's something a lot newer than that. It's less than 20 years old. And it comes from this mentality that, rape is worse than murder and things of that nature. And I'm sorry to say it, but it's not. I mean, there is such thing as rape survivors. I haven't met anyone who is a murder survivor. Just saying. So there's that, and there's also the overzealous, the zealotry of the what they call the Crown Prosecution Service, which again is ran by a zealot. I mean, Alison Saunders is a zealot, a feminist zealot, a militant misandrist, essentially. I mean, that's her defense. Oh, what happened here is regrettable, and I want to apologize to all parties involved. Why? I mean, the accuser, why do you have to apologize to the accuser? No, you don't apologize to all parties involved. You apologize to the victim being Liam Allen. That's it. Yeah, but because she's a zealot, she can't do that. Go ahead, please.
And the sole issue is that, once a woman comes forward and says she's been raped, and this poor young darling can't withdraw her accusation, and because if because it's apparently just perfectly normal to make your rape accusations because you regret that you had sex later on, or because you had a bad experience or something, or because you want to get back at a ex-boyfriend for leaving you or something like that. Apparently, that's just normal. That just happens sometimes. But once women are caught in a situation, they don't know what to do with these poor darlings. Give me a fucking break.
Yeah.
This is a very serious crime, and if you make a false accusation, then yes, there should be very serious criminal consequences for that. Obviously.
Yeah. What the attorney is saying, and she's not wrong, is that basically there is no obvious way to withdraw it, and in most cases now, what the attorney doesn't say that, but I've heard it from that chap who was prosecuted for allegedly groping that Nigerian Irish lady. Damn, I can't remember his name. He spoke at the 2016 conference. Anyway, the point is that if you go to the police and say, "Look, I want to withdraw my deposition. I was wrong, or I lied, whatever." Most of the time, the police refuse to, and even when they don't, they'll scare up the individual and say, "Oh, well, you just can't do that, or if you do, you might go to jail and whatnot," and they exaggerate the consequences so as to essentially scare it's literally a sales target culture.
Yeah.
I mean, the metaphor used by the attorney is very spot on here. It is a sales target culture, but of course, otherwise, I mean, where I'm coming from, if you admit your crime, in this case, filing a false police report, that's a mitigating circumstance. So
Yeah, of course.
So the consequences are much lower, usually a fine or things like that. You don't really go to jail. That could be implemented fairly easy, even for sexual offenses. Why not? I mean, that used to be the case, again, until about 98, 99, 2000, something like that. Why can't that be brought back again? It's where it worked for several hundreds of years flawlessly. Or almost flawlessly, but anyway, it worked much better than the current system, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, if then it happens that if you come forward and say to the police, I want to withdraw my accusations, it's not actually true, then they pressure you to not do that. That seems to me completely absurd. I mean, it's the police's job to prosecute actual criminals, not to just prosecute a certain number of people. I mean, it's not like we're in the Soviet Union where you have to have a certain quota of people sent to the gulag. I mean, what is that?
Are you sure we're not in the Soviet Union? Because many of these officials do sound like Soviet officials to me, and sometimes even worse than that. I mean, no, it's the worst part of this, besides the police refusing to disclose essentially exculpatory evidence. The worst part in this story to me is the chief of the Crown Prosecution Service saying, "Oh, I want to apologize to all parties involved." No. No, just no. And again, this is not
what would other parties actually harm there? I mean,
yeah, there you go.
the accused. Who else is supposed to apologize? The accuser who lied, the prosecutors who sat on this exonerating evidence. Who else is harmed? I mean, I guess the barrister there who had to work late hours to discover this.
Yeah.
But I mean, all parties involved? Seriously? I mean, I guess you could apologize to the British taxpayers for funding this raid, but other than that, who's actually harmed there?
Yeah. It's a good thing that, well, of course, Liam was very lucky to be able to either afford or someone paid for him, or maybe found this Julia barrister willing to do this pro bono for him. Because, again, this is a very experienced attorney. The criminal defense barrister for 24 years. 3/4 of her caseload involves defending those accused of sex crimes. This is an expert here.
Yep.
She knows her way around the system, which is great. I mean, but most men cannot even afford these kinds of experts to have them run defenses for them. That's one aspect. Second aspect is that the good thing that Liam had this expert defending him is that now she's pushing to sue the CPS and force them to either reform or pay reparations and whatnot, which is great, of course, except for the taxpayer. But then again, with most cases, most men cannot afford such an expert to defend them.
Yep.
I mean, the barrister is correct when he says, look, there are many other men languishing in prison right now. They may not even know that exculpatory evidence existed to begin with.
Yeah, and the public defender certainly won't go to that sort of trouble to find those incriminating text messages.
Yeah, that's very rarely the case. And one other aspect that is hidden somewhat within this text is that, as it turns out, and this case is a good I guess, proof in that direction, that actually the third-party character of the accuser does matter. Because again, the bulk of the exculpatory part was not the accuser's conversation with the accused, but the accuser's conversation with her friends.
Yep.
So, because, feminists always tell us, oh, but what, the sexual history and the character of the woman accusing doesn't matter. Well, actually it does. Actually it does.
Yeah, I mean, when it's sort of a he said, she said case, and you're going to make it about character, and of course, yeah, the accuser's character matters.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know this sounds harsh for genuine rape victims, but, woman up.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can have the standard. Of course, we're only going to look at hard evidence. So if you want to have a conviction, you need to have, video evidence, or you need to have witnesses, or you need to have someone, or you need to have a case where the accused actually denies having had sex, and then you have a rape kit or something to prove that he did, something like that. In which case there's going to be almost no rape convictions.
Mhm.
Or you have to have this, or you go with this sort of examining the character of the people and so on. But if you do that, you actually have to look at the possible exculpatory evidence from that as well. I mean, if you just reduce it to is this story plausible, and do we believe this woman might have been raped or something like that, obviously going to get lots of false convictions.
Yeah. And make no mistake, in the United Kingdom, at the very least, you can still ask these kinds of questions. In the United States, you can't. There is such thing as the rape shield laws.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing.
No, it's not amazing. It's brutal insanity, mate. Horrifying. Right, let's go to the next one.
Okay, the next one is again from the UK, from The Guardian. To be happier, women should try giving up on being good. A new NHS survey shows women to be unhappier than men for almost their entire lives, until their mid-80s, by when the men with whom they have often shared those lives have usually dropped dead. It is not an encouraging scenario. That women are unhappy until their partners die is not flattering for men. For the women, it is even worse. They are the miserable ones. Post-Weinstein, we fear that powerful men are toxic. Now it appears that everyday male partners are toxic too. This must be put into context. Men are 3 times more likely to kill themselves. But for everyday misery, women beat men every time. For anyone of a remotely feminist persuasion, this is unanswerable proof that men are a trial, a burden, and selfish to boot. Men make you miserable. Women are unhappiest in the middle years, with 24% aged between 45 and 54 classifiable as mentally ill. Kate Lovett, Dean of the Royal College of Psychiatrists, explains that at this point women, quote, are still more likely to bear the brunt of domestic and caring responsibilities. The misery levels tail off as old age kicks in and the burdens of children and looking after aging parents lessen. All women have to make them miserable then is their husbands. Further analysis of the figures supports the case that men are the problem. Above the age of 65, more men than women have mental health problems, 19% against 14%. Because men who are single, widowed, or divorced are more likely to develop depression. In contrast, married women are the most likely to be miserable. One of the comments following a newspaper article in which this survey is reported talks about a grandmother who hated her husband so much that when he went to the loo, she would get up and punch the chair, pretending it was him. As a man, I feel compelled to offer an alternative explanation for wives' unhappiness. Psychometric analyses show women cross-culturally registering higher levels in 4 of the big 5 personality matrices: agreeableness, conscientiousness, neuroticism, and extroversion. The other is openness. Most of these differences are relatively small, if consistent, but the neurotic matrix, and this is a misleading word as it does not mean hysterical or hypersensitive, but something more like easily hurt, has the biggest variation by far. Women tend to be higher in negative emotion and more responsive to grief, threat, punishment, and isolation, whether they are Swedish, Spanish, or Saudi. The phenomenon crosses all cultures, suggesting, theoretically, that it is inborn. And conscientiousness, while useful, can lead to unhealthy perfectionism. If you expect things to be perfect, you will be disappointed. If you discount psychometrics, some branded junk science, there are other reasons why women in middle age are likely to be unhappy. The menopause isn't much fun, and perhaps the fading of physical charms that both genders experience may be taken harder by women, as it is usually so much more powerful for them in the first place. I am not making excuses for men. Well, I am. Perhaps our ability to wriggle off the hook is the other reason why we find more reasons to be cheerful. Maybe women are unhappier than men because they pin themselves to higher moral standards. I think I would rather be happy than good. Women should try it. They might be amazed at how much their partners appreciate it because it will reduce their burden of male guilt. And at the same time, it will cheer up the women themselves. Given all the chairs wives will no longer have to punch, there will be considerable saving on upholstery.
Go ahead, James.
Do not get married. It's that simple. I don't know how much clearer I can make that.
The first thing that comes to mind when I want to say something about this article is hilarious. I mean, really hilarious.
Yeah, I didn't think we were going to go to the silly place this early.
Yeah, but I mean, come on, give me a freaking break. Oh my God, where is some women in the nursery, the grandmother was punching a chair when he was going to the loo. Yeah, how is that relevant? Who cares? Yeah, there are a lot of mentally ill ladies, just like there are a lot of mentally ill old men.
Yeah, but the out is that they can blame all that mental illness on the patriarchy.
Yeah, fair enough, I guess.
It's also remarkable how little actual support there is for this idea that it's men's fault. There's like exactly one single sentence in the whole thing that actually supports that contention. In contrast, married women are the most likely to be miserable. And that's all we get. We don't get any numbers put to that. We don't get told if it's just in this age group that's mentioned before, above the age of 65, or whether it's in general. There's remarkably little detail about that, even though that's sort of the main contention of the article, that somehow it's men's fault that women are unhappy.
Yeah, yeah, and and in general, I really don't think it is the case. I mean, it says, where is it? Yeah, here. The misery levels tails off as old age kicks in, and the burdens, blah blah blah. All women. No, hold on a second. There is a portion where I say after the men die, women suddenly fare better. I just don't think that's the case, like at all, because well, even the feminists would have to agree with me on this one. I mean, aren't the feminists saying that widowed old women have it the worst because once their husbands die and they already have lower pensions and whatnot, things turn quite sour for them? I mean, even the feminists would have to agree with me. I mean, and in the past, feminists used to push this kind of analysis.
That was Germaine Greer, by the way.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, but then again, Germaine Greer is now haram in feminist circles, so I guess there's that. But yeah, I mean, I don't think it is the case. I don't think a widowed 85-year-old lady is better off than an 85-year-old lady who is with her husband of 30 years or 40 years. I just don't think it is the case at all.
Yeah, I mean, so I can well imagine that at this age, women report higher levels of happiness than men. But at this age, most men's health is already severely failing, whereas women are still more likely to be more or less healthy. So it doesn't seem particularly unreasonable to suppose that this happiness gap reverses at in the mid 80s. But I mean, I would like to see a comparison between 85-year-old women who are married and unmarried, and like you break it down by married, never married, and widowed or divorced. And my guess would be that the married ones would be higher in happiness, but I don't know.
Mm.
The article certainly doesn't tell us, and it's just very high in the narrative, very low in the data.
Yeah.
But actually, they do offer quite a bit of data, but none of the data actually, or almost none of the data actually supports the contention that they make.
Yeah, basically.
And I find that very suspicious, because if they give us lots of data in other places where it doesn't support their core contention that men make women unhappy, and then they don't give us any data, or just sort of allude to some data very vaguely, when it does support the narrative, that makes me very suspicious.
Yeah.
I haven't looked at the original data, so I don't know, but I strongly suspect that the actual data don't quite tell the story they want to tell here.
Yeah. What I found it particularly surprising is to see this one published, even though this comes from an anonymous WordPress blog, an anonymous free WordPress blog, to be more precise. It's really weird to see this published on The Guardian, because in the past they would at least try to make the claim that they were a serious publication. We don't stoop to this kind of garbage and whatnot. It seems to no longer be the case. Yeah, it's hilarious. You know what else is hilarious? Claiming that ballet is forbidden for boys when it actually isn't.
So I just wanted to make one point about one line that they have there.
Sure.
Where is it? If we discount psychometrics, some branded junk science, there are other reasons and so on. It's I just found that quite funny. Is if you discount heliocentrism, some branded junk science, there's many geocentric reasons to believe this, and so on.
Yeah. Well, it seems to, and maybe I could be wrong on this one, but it does appear to me that there is an uptick in anti-science militancy on the far left. I mean, they always like to tarnish the right for having creationists in their midst and whatnot, which is fair enough. But on the far left, they deny the realities of biological sex. They deny psychometrics. They deny so many branches of science. Not to mention vaccines. Most of the anti-vaxxers are on the far left, which is something else that you want to read in a mainstream newspaper. I don't know if this is an uptick or it's just that we get to observe it much closely than we used to observe it 10 years ago. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. But it's just psychometrics is about as rigorous as it gets in the social sciences. If you want to discount that, then you have to throw out the entire social sciences, basically.
Yeah.
If you use the same standards.
Yeah, and I don't have much respect for psychology. I still think it's mostly alchemy, and less to do with chemistry. I have much more respect with psychiatry, but nevertheless, I mean, psychometrics, IQ tests, these are the only few things that are indeed rigorous to a certain extent in psychology. And yeah, as you say, if you discount that, then we might as well throw everything else in the dustbin.
Sure, there's problems with things like IQ testing, with things like the Big Five model of personality and so on. There are definitely problems with that, but it's the best we have.
No.
And if you throw out the best we have, then we can just throw up our arms and say we know nothing, but that's not going to bring us very far.
Yeah. All right, let's go to the next one, which is sort of, again, also from the silly place, I guess. Coming from the Telegraph. I can't believe I'm reading this. Teach boys ballet and Zumba to make physical education gender neutral, head of sports organization says. Schools should give boys lessons in Zumba and ballet to promote the idea that physical education is gender neutral, the head of a leading sports organization has said, as she reveals that girls as young as 6 are losing interest in exercise. Offering a full range of activities will help to combat the stereotypes and quote-unquote cultural norms that are putting girls off sport before they reach junior school, according to Ruth Holdaway, who is chief executive of Women in Sport. In addition to giving female pupils the options to play cricket and football, boys should also be asked what they want and given the opportunity to do a Zumba class or whatever, she said. That's very scientific there, a Zumba class or whatever. Speaking of which, I looked it up. There's nowhere in the United Kingdom or anywhere in the world, actually, where boys are forbidden or not allowed to do a ballet. I haven't found much about Zumba. There aren't too many Zumba classes in the United Kingdom, but where they are, they're open to everyone. Anyway, Ms. Holdaway told the Daily Telegraph that, quote, boys should be offered a full range of activities in sport. It might contribute to breaking down stereotypes. Why shouldn't a boy be a dancer? Of course they can be, and we know there are wonderful male ballerinas. Boys should see dance as much as something they can enjoy as it is for girls, close quote. However, she added that giving boys more options will not solve the problem of girls' disengagement with sports, since for decades, girls have been proactively excluded from playing sports like football and cricket. That's a lie. She said that research conducted by her organization, that's definitely a lie, showed that girls begin to lose interest in sport when they are as young as 6. Yeah, so do boys. You know, the kids of today like to sit in front of a computer a lot more. Anyway, for girls around the age of 6 or 7, they are starting to drop out of sport. What is particularly interesting is that this is the same time that boys are doing more, she said. Not particularly true. What seems to be happening is up until that age, boys and girls feel the same. They just run around, they don't think about what they're doing, they will explore, they will climb. But there is something going on around that age that boys start to understand sport is something that they should be doing, they can do it, they get recognized for, and they get encouraged to do. Ms. Holloway said that teachers should not make any assumptions about which sports girls or boys would like to play. It's all part of the same issue. If the boys get to play football and cricket and the girls play rounders and have a dance class, you're not offering girls the same opportunities, she said. Often you will be surprised if you ask girls what they want. There will be an assumption that they want to do dance, and many of them will, but they might also want to play football or cricket or whatever. Again, that very scientific word there, the whatever. Ms. Holdaway said that school teachers and parents must have an effort to talk about women's sport with as much enthusiasm as they do about men's. Children are going to have a lot of contact with men's sports. It is around them all the time, with parents talking about it, teachers talking about. Are people talking about the women's ashes? Are they making an effort? Are they, I guess, making an effort to make sure they're talking about both men's and women's ashes so there is parity? Yeah, they probably don't, and there is a reason for that. Women's sports is trash. Other practical steps schools can take to encourage girls to play sport could include making adaptations to changing rooms. Female students may think, if I'm going to get hot and sweaty, I need to put my hair up, I need to take it back down, and if I don't have a mirror, I can't do that. Small changes like allowing girls more time in the changing rooms and putting up extra mirrors may encourage them to run around and get hot and sweaty during physical education lessons. Earlier this year, Baroness Sue Campbell, who is head of women's football at the Football Association, said schools should put up nice-smelling soap in changing rooms to encourage girls to play sports. That sounds something like a baroness would say. I mean, let's face it. Amazing.
So if I may summarize that article, girls are losing interest in sports, so therefore we should make boys do Zumba lessons so that they also lose interest in sport, and so then it's equal.
Mhm. Yeah,
Did I get the gist here of that article?
yeah, I think you did. Yeah, I think you did. You basically skipped the 3/4 of the article, which is basically false claims or uh, reasonably false claims. I mean, again, there is no such thing as boys not allowed to do ballet or girls not allowed to play football and whatnot. That's just a lie, right there. As for losing and gaining interest, yeah, it's the fucking biology. And the portion, oh, but do they speak equally about men's and women's ashes so there is parity? Yeah, no, they probably don't and probably won't and never will, because 5 years ago, 4 years and a half ago, in the summer of 2013, we had a show on this show on this called Women's Sports. It's episode 30 something. And we talked about women's sports and we broke it down then by sport and showed that basically, with the possible exception of chess, and even there is some discussion, women's sports is just inferior. So of course it's not going to draw the similar enthusiasm among parents, amongst teachers, and so on. And no, they won't speak identically about them, and there won't be parity and never will. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, and even in chess, as I think right now, one woman in the top 100.
Yeah, the Hungarian lady,
is-
Judith Polgar.
No, it's not her. She actually quit.
She quit?
It's
Okay.
no longer playing professionally. It's now a different woman. It's some sort of young Chinese woman. I don't know her name exactly, but yeah.
Yeah, if it's not Eastern European, it's a Chinese for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and then this Chinese lady, she's apparently extremely talented and so on, but she doesn't want to play chess full time. So even though she could, maybe if she put in your full time effort, she could be one of the world's best, but she doesn't want to do it. And so she's just sort of somewhere in the top 100, and that's just pretty much the story of why women do not succeed at the highest level in things like chess, where there's no like physical biological reasons for them to not be as good. It's just they don't have that sort of single-minded focus that some men do.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean,
Yeah.
How do the French say? Vive la différence. What's so wrong about that? Go ahead.
She doesn't have any sort of obligation to be the best chess player she can be.
There you go. There you go. Yeah.
And if that bothers you because you want I don't know, a female world champion or something, then I don't know.
Go fuck yourself.
Maybe go fuck yourself or go train chess yourself if you're a woman.
Yeah.
But I mean, this Chinese woman doesn't owe you anything.
Yeah. And there's also the aspect that is particularly true about the United Kingdom, not so much the rest of not so much the continental Europe, is the fact that, first of all, there is the general trend, which is true in all of Europe, that is to say, children today are less interested in physical activities than my generation or your generation used to be, because, when I was 7, there was no YouTube and there were not many video games, and even if there were, we couldn't afford them. Well, first of all, we didn't have access to them, and then communism fell, and we had access to them, but they were bloody expensive. So we would do a lot more physical activities on our own, because that was the easiest and the most accessible thing to do. That's no longer the case today. So this is true all over Europe. But then there's also specifically the case of the United Kingdom, where recess has been more or less abolished in most schools. So there is not much physical activity outside the physical education class for most kids that are, at least those that are in state schools, which is to say most of them. And I don't know about you, but when I was 7 or 8 or 9, if I wanted to play football, I would have preferred to play football without adults being around and giving orders. I would play football whenever I would feel like playing football, and not from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. when there's the physical education class. No, fuck you and your physical education class. And I suspect kids still do feel the same even today. But if you want to see more kids interested in physical activities of any kind, Maybe bring back recess, just saying. It wouldn't be such a bad thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, recess has been a part of schooling experience since before the Prussian model took over. I mean, even the private Catholic schools or Protestant schools in the 1700s or 1600s had recess as part of their schedule. And I know this for sure because I recently visited a Protestant private school that existed on the current territory of Romania between 1680 and 1802 or something like that. And there was the official schedule from 17 something displayed. It's a museum now, of course, and it had recess in it. So maybe bring back that. It wouldn't be such a bad idea. Just saying.
Yeah, and I mean it's not exactly rocket science. People, there's a lot of new and innovative ideas in education and so on, but pretty much anyone you ask will agree that recess and pauses in between learning is very important.
Yeah.
And
not just learning, but also working. I mean, the Japanese are rediscovering the value of recess in the workplace because they have that workaholic culture, and now they've introduced mandatory recess just to stop people from working for a while and do something else.
Yeah, I mean, humans just aren't designed to just non-stop work for like 4 or 5 hours at a block. That it's not efficient to do that.
Yeah.
You need some breaks in between.
Yeah, and this is true with children as well. It is true in learning as well, which is in the end also a form of work.
Yeah.
So yeah, if they want to increase girls' interest in sports, maybe they could bring back recess. Just saying. But then again, they don't want to increase girls' interest in sport. They want to decrease boys' interest in sport. Because that's the only way you can achieve equality. It's true in economics and it's true in everything else as well. That's why socialism is garbage. Right, let's go to the next one, and I promise it's the last piece of news from the United Kingdom. Coming from the official website of the government of the United Kingdom, new universities regulator comes into force. The Office for Students legally comes into force to hold universities to account and promote students' interests. The Office for Students, the new regulator designed to champion the interests of students, promote choice, and help to ensure that students are receiving a good deal for their investment in higher education, has legally come into force today, January the 1st, the current year. With the legal establishment of the OFS, Education Secretary Justin Greening has announced the final 6 appointments for the OFS's 15-strong board. The OFS will replace the old HEFCE as the main regulator of higher education and will hold universities to account for the quality of teaching they provide. It marks a major milestone in the implementation of the Higher Education and Research Act of 2017, and the OFS will have an explicit legal duty to promote choice and consider the student, employer, and taxpayer interests. Anyway, the article is very technical. They tell us all the members of the Board of Trustees. We don't care about that. What we do care is basically this new body will also be able to fine universities and sanction universities if they do deplatforming or censorship or whatnot. And probably they will also have to crack down a little bit on the negative effects of affirmative action, because there is such thing as the British taxpayers paying for many doctors, but because of female favoring for affirmative action, the taxpayers don't get enough doctors anyway into their NHS, and they have to import from abroad, and probably the OFS will have to tackle some of that too. In a way, I guess it's a winning, but then again, it's a government solution to a government-created problem. I don't know. Take it from here.
Yeah, I mean, from this article, it sounds reasonable. It sounds good. Whether they will actually work
as most temporary government bureaucracies.
Whether they will actually do anything useful in practice remains to be seen. But as of now, I'm cautiously optimistic.
If they manage to convince, if they manage to force one university to host a lecture from a non-feminist or a non-leftist, I wouldn't even dare to say a conservative, just a non-leftist would be a good start. Maybe I'll start being a little bit more optimistic. For now, I'm like, yeah, maybe. I don't know. But it seems to me like a government solution to a government-created problem, especially on the issues of affirmative action. Maybe if you hadn't allowed that to begin with, we might have been a better, just don't allow federal or I don't know crown funding for the universities that do affirmative action or things like that. Set up a system of incentives rather than an intricate system of laws that nobody can really understand.
Yep.
I don't know, just saying. All right, let's go to the next one. The next one is really funny.
Okay, coming from the Irish Mirror. Irish straight best friends marry to avoid paying 50,000 euros inheritance tax on a house. Two straight best friends tied a knot today to avoid paying 50,000 euros in inheritance tax on a house. A harpist serenaded Matt Murphy and Michael O'Sullivan as they walked down the aisle, arm in arm at Sir Patrick Dunn's Hospital Registry Office in Dublin, in front of 11 witnesses. Matt, 83, decided a few months ago to leave his house in Stoneybatter, West Dublin, to dad of three, Michael, who is his carer. The pair, who have been pals for almost 30 years and lived together, realized Michael would face a crippling tax bill after Matt died. Speaking to the Irish Mirror, 58-year-old Michael said it was Matt's plan to get married to avoid the huge bill. He explained, "I've known Matty for 30 years. We became very friendly after my second relationship broke up. I've been bringing Matt out of my car to various parties and all that kind of thing. He became friends with all my friends. They all loved him. I lost my apartment and then was living in somebody's house. That house was sold and I ended up being homeless. Matty then unfortunately got a problem with his eyes. He started getting pains in his head. His vision started to get bad. He was diagnosed with a giant cell arthritis, which affects the optic nerve. He's on 12 steroids a day, very, very strong stuff. When he went home, he struggled. I stayed over with him for a while, and eventually Matt said, 'Why don't you come and stay here?' I would go over and stay with him the odd time, but never full time. He said that he couldn't pay me as a career. Eventually, Matt said the only way he could pay me was to leave me the house. He said he would give me the house so I have somewhere to live when he goes. I told him there was a great idea that I would have to sell the house as it would have to pay inheritance tax, massive tax. With what would be left over, you wouldn't have had enough left to buy another house. He was chatting a friend down the country in a casual contemporary, and he jokingly said we should get married. Then one night he turned around and said it to me, and I said I would marry him. The equality gain lesbian people did for this country that they fought hard for, they were discriminated against for most of their lives, they got equality for themselves, but also for everybody else. And Michael said the two friends couldn't get over how news of the plans spread around the world. He added, "It's crazy. I read an article about it online in Malaysia." Meanwhile, Matt described Michael as the brother he always wanted, saying, "I would have loved to have a brother or sister. He's always so concerned about me. He's my best friend." When asked if he had ever got close to walking down the aisle before, the pensioner said he had done many years ago. He added, "There was a young woman, but she went to work in Manchester. I had no money at the time. I was only about 5 shillings a week at the time. It was more than 60 years ago. We lost touch after a while. That was the closest thing I got to marriage." Michael told the Irish Mirror the Garda, Revenue Commissioners and former Attorney General Michael McDowell all agreed they were doing nothing illegal.
You should have seen the coverage of this story on The Guardian, particularly the comments section, because the core readership of The Guardian was very, very conflicted. I mean, on one hand, they were like, "Yeah, yay, gay marriage," and on the other hand, hold on a second, this is tax avoidance, and they're scamming the taxman and fooling the society and eat the rich and all of the rest of the socialist garbage.
Oh, they're stealing their own money.
Yeah, basically, they're stealing from the society. Now, on the economic side, I don't think it is a surprise if I say that I don't believe in inheritance tax. I think the idea of inheritance tax is brutally retarded per se and should never exist for any reason, no matter the amount. I mean, some people are saying, "Oh, hold on a second. If it's just a 50,000 euros tax, maybe the what's it called, the floor for the minimum amount from which taxes would apply should be lifted up higher to much bigger mansions and whatnot. And I'm like, no, there should be no minimum or maximum. There should be no inheritance tax, period. Because the assumption should be, and is in most cases, in reality as well, that that inheritance has already been taxed during the lifetime of the individual owning it, or it was built using income that was already taxed at least once. So taxing it again is just insane. I mean, multiple taxation is cancer. I'm not a big fan of gay marriage, as in at all. I think it's an insane thing to begin with. But I'm a big fan of using retarded laws against the state. So if the state is foolish enough to pass these kinds of brutally insane laws, I'm all for using them against the state.
Yeah, I mean, these kinds of loopholes are great, and then these are if the state gives us these tools to get out of paying taxes, then we'd be foolish not to take them.
Yeah. And again, I'm not, I always go into dangerous territory because I say I'm not just for tax avoidance, but also for tax evasion. But nevertheless, evasion is a crime, avoidance is not. Avoidance means using all the legal means to pay as little as possible to the state. And, for everyone who doesn't practice tax avoidance, I'm asking, what the hell is wrong with you? I mean, if you want to donate to the state a lot more, I wouldn't try to stop you, but still, what's wrong with you? Why can't you into tax avoidance? It's really funny. It's really funny, and I presume they'll eventually close this loophole. But if they don't, I think everyone should try to exploit this to its fullest extent. Why not?
Yeah, I mean, there's a case to be made that rules that can be used for tax avoidance should be changed so that there's less possibility of changing the amount of tax you pay based on your behavior, because then taxes are less distortive in that case. And that argument is fine as far as it goes, but just generally my opinion is the less tax the better. And so I'm very happy to see these two people avoid this inheritance tax. I also think that government shouldn't be involved in marriage at all, whether it's gay or straight or otherwise.
Yeah, that would be the best policy for sure.
Yeah, and if they must be involved in marriage, then they shouldn't grant special privileges or special rights to or special obligations to people who marry. I don't see why the state should treat married people different from anyone else. Why should it? Why should I be punished for leaving a house to my friend rather than to a wife or a husband? Why should that be treated differently?
Well, it's a long story about that, and we have a lot of other news to discuss. I won't get into that debate. What I will say, though, is that in most of Europe, and that's true for Ireland as well, but it's especially true for Central and Eastern Europe. So France, Germany, all of Eastern Europe, most of the South. The body of law evolved in such a way that if you're not married, you cannot really leave your inheritance to whomever you please. The state comes in and redistributes it, which I think is a very, very sad development and cruel in many ways.
And there are certain minimum portions you need to give to people based on their relation with you.
Yeah. Unless you're married, then you can leave it to your spouse.
Then you can leave it all to him or her. Yeah,
or the children if the spouse is dead or whatever.
Yeah.
Still, it's brutally insane, and repealing that kind of body of law, it's going to take forever. I suppose it will eventually happen, or it will be circumvented in various ways, such as, I don't know, liquidating all the assets prior to death and then distributing the shekels from your wallet, or things like that. I've seen people doing that, and I think it will become a much more common practice as courts gain more influence. But nevertheless, using the stupid laws against the state, and in the benefit of your fellow man, essentially. But I see nothing wrong with that. And one more thing is, in the past, marriage used to be a lot more about keeping wealth in the family, and a lot less about love. I mean, marriage for love is a relatively new concept. So, in a way, these guys are a lot more traditional.
Yeah, I mean, marriage for love isn't necessarily new, but the idea that marriage should only be for love is quite new.
Yeah, that's correct.
Obviously,
Yeah,
people still married for love, 1,000 years ago, but it wasn't the
It wasn't
only,
the norm.
often not the primary reason to get married.
Yeah, that's a much better way of putting it. Yeah, that's what I meant. I mean, marriage for the purpose of keeping property in the family has always been a part of the deal
Yeah.
for quite some time. Only recently it has become somewhat shameful, as in, oh, you're gonna marry that person only for to keep the wealth in the family and whatnot. This used to be a very legitimate and noble reason to do it for hundreds and hundreds of years, at least in Europe.
Yeah, and it's considered kind of sort of shameful if you married just for love, if
Yeah,
it was not in the interests of your family's wealth and so on. That was considered a bit
weird at the very least.
disreputable.
Yeah, weird at the very least.
Yeah.
Right.
Now
Okay.
we find out you're a big fat liar because you have another piece from the UK.
Yeah. Oh, sorry about that. But yeah, the reason I put it after this one is because it's from the same thing. The LGBT is nonsense. Coming from the Daily Mail, the National Health Service is forced to apologize after a woman having a smear test specifically requested a female only to be met by a pre-op transgender medic with stubble and a beard. A woman who asked to be seen by a female nurse when she went for a smear test was embarrassed when she was allocated a person with a stubble and a beard. Upon being called in for the procedure, the patient said she was distressed to discover that the nurse was biologically male. When she pointed out the mistake, the nurse responded that their gender was not male and that they were transsexual. In the end, the patient decided not to go ahead with the intimate procedure and complained to the NHS. She told the Sunday Times that it was weird where somebody says to you, "My gender is not male," and you think, what does that even mean? You're clearly a man. The patient described the nurse as having an obviously male appearance, close cropped hair, a male facial appearance and voice, large number of tattoos, and facial stubble. The woman received an apology from the NHS following the incident at a clinic of Northwest London NHS Foundation on September the 16th last year. In her letter of complaint, she wrote that when booking the appointment, she had requested a female nurse or practitioner. She added, people who are not comfortable about this are presented as bigots, and this is kind of how I was made to feel about it. The patient emphasized that her complaint was not in relation to the nurse's appearance or gender status. It comes as Equalities Minister and Education Secretary Justine Greening said she was considering proposals that allowed people to legally change their gender without being diagnosed by a doctor. Ms. Greening was last week said to be getting cold feet about self-certification after a consultation on changes to the Gender Recognition Act was delayed. James Caspian, a psychotherapist who specializes in working with transgender people, said scenarios similar to that of the patient who went for a smear test experience would become more common if self-certification went ahead. He argued that politicians had not thought through the implications of such move. Central and Northwest London NHS Foundation Trust said, quote, "We apologize to this patient for the recording error, and because the staff member accepted they didn't manage the situation appropriately or professionally, the patient needed to feel listened to." No, the patient needed to be consulted by a biological woman. There's a difference. Anyway, trust policy for all services is to consider seriously all requests for clinicians of a particular gender. It allows patients to feel more supported. We will deny a request if we believe it to be sexually motivated or where there might be a risk to a member of staff, but we always explain ourselves. That's not helping. NHS guidelines say transgender employees receive equal treatment and protection from discrimination at work, but does not go into specifics about procedures. The national census will ask every home in England and Wales if a transgender person lived there. The question, likely to be on the 2021 census, will be the first official attempt to count people who say they were born in the wrong sex, and this is brutal insanity.
Which part of all of it?
All of it. I mean, really? You're gonna put a tranny in to ask households if a tranny lives in there? First of all, why should that be the business of the state? Secondly, if this whole self-certification business becomes a thing, the Brits have trolled in the past to get Jedi recognized as a religion. Don't put it past them to inflate the number of trannies just because they can. I also expect after the 2021 census to see a number of ethnic Kekistanis recognized in the United Kingdom. I'm just saying. As for the whole thing, I really don't think, and even if it is bigotry, I think it should be very accepted bigotry to be able to choose who gets to consult you, and up to and including the sex of the person who sees you in a medical settlement. It's just, I think it should be definitely accepted. And if I don't want trannies to put big things up my vaginas, as it was the case with this patient, that's fine. I think that should be fine.
Yeah, especially with such a procedure, it seems certainly reasonable to request a practitioner who is a female, and and in this case, obviously, female means biologically female, not thinks is a woman.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and it's especially egregious in a case where this person apparently clearly looks male. I mean, if it's a transgender person who actually looks female, I can sort of see it maybe, but if this person has a beard and looks clearly male and sounds male and so on, no, sorry.
Yeah, the whole thing is just insanity, and I was called a bigot a billion times for saying that this is where it will end up to, because not being able to say, come on, that man has a huge beard and a plethora of tattoos, that man is clearly a man, and you'd be called a bigot for that. When I said that in 2015, say, oh, come on, you're exaggerating. Well, there you go. And this is only the beginning. I mean, if this tranny nonsense is not stopped and brutally torpedoed, I might add, the agenda, that is, things will get a lot worse than this. I mean, this is just the beginning. Because if biology doesn't matter at all, then nothing matters.
Yeah, I'm a lot more sympathetic to transgender people than you are, but I mean, clearly we have to draw a line somewhere. It can't just be about self-identification. If I say that I'm the Emperor Napoleon and you're supposed to refer to me as Your Majesty, obviously the correct thing to do is laugh at me. If someone who is, or maybe recommend a mental institution I can go to, but anyway. If someone who clearly, obviously looks male says I'm a woman, I'm sorry, but I don't think we should respect that.
Yeah, basically. Amazing.
At least you have to put in some sort of effort to actually appear to be female if we want society to recognize you as such. But just to say I'm a woman
Too bad I don't have the time to go to Sweden at that women-only and queer folk festival to just go there and say, I'm a woman, you have to let me in. And if they don't, I'm going to bring the discrimination ombudsman with me. But I really need to find a volunteer from Sweden to go there. Seriously, guys, I'll pay for it. Just go with the camera. Publish the footage. No, seriously. It's not about sympathy for transgender people or not. And yes, I have very low sympathy for especially for the pro-tranny agenda. For the individuals themselves, they're clearly mentally deranged and should, of course, have access to psychiatric help. But it's not about sympathy at all. It is about, at the end of the day, yes, the rights of the majority. I think the vast majority will recognize a tall, bearded man full of tattoos as being a man. And if that man says he's a woman, well, tough. I don't care. Nobody will care. And I think the majority should have the right to do that. And if you consider it bigotry, fine. Let it be bigotry. I think that bigotry needs to be accepted. Because it's bigotry based on reality. It's nothing bad with that. Right, let's go to the next one.
The next one is from Germany, from Spiegel. Daring more silence. In 1902, the writer and women's rights activist Hedwig Dohm described the following scene, which occurred at a New Year's Eve celebration. Quote, on New Year's Eve, I overheard one of these men's rights people who was still brewing the punch telling his wife, who had called out Happy New Year right as the clock struck 12, around here, I'm the one who decides when it's midnight. What is beautiful about this anecdote is that we don't have to listen to this kind of thing anymore. Progress. What is sad about it is that we hear different kinds of nonsense today. For the new year, I've made a list of things I would like to no longer hear in 2018. And in parentheses, if you make resolutions for other people, you cannot fail them. An idea which my colleague Augstein also seems to have had yesterday. As sort of funny aside, this Augstein column, in this he goes through 5 ways in which the German state is failing, and his conclusion at the end is we need to give the state more power and money because if it fails, then obviously it needs more power and money. But just an aside. On with the actual article. These are a couple of phrases that are easily uttered nowadays, but which are very wrong, equally wrong as someone who thinks that it cannot be midnight because he isn't yet finished with his punch. Don't embarrass yourself like this, and do help others who commit these faux pas. Then 2018 will be a better year, I promise. And I'll only go to the first 2 because these are the most relevant to kind of topic we cover on this show. So number 1, the actual losers stroke victims today are men. Please don't. The idea that it's mostly men today who are doing poorly can be heard whenever someone describes some area where women are having problems. Then people say, yes, but men are more likely to be unemployed and homeless or to suffer heart attacks. They live shorter lives than women, and there are more garbage men than garbage women. All of this is completely true. And boys do worse in schools than girls. If I'd be willing to pray, I would pray for the insight that all of this can be true at the same time. There's nothing contradictory about acknowledging that boys are doing remarkably badly in schools and obviously need better support, and that furthermore, women fall prey to sexualized violence and still earn less money on average than men in comparable positions. There are no actual losers, neither men nor women. Men are at the very bottom and at the very top. They are more likely to be homeless, but also more likely to be CEOs than women. So there are good reasons why it sounds asinine when the Manufactum CEO claims in the FAZ ad section, interview, that a re-emancipation of men is imminent. Quote, I believe men's autarky is just returning. Wake up, it has never been gone. Number 2, political correctness has gone too far. On the one hand, my ears bleed whenever I hear this phrase, no matter what the topic. Unisex toilets in public buildings, rewritings of classic children's books, or basic rights for disabled people. On the other hand, I can't believe that the idea of a pernicious correctness could come so far in this country. Germany is a country in which people complain if the bus which goes once every 3 minutes, if the bus which goes once every 10 minutes is 3 minutes late. It seems bizarrely implausible if people here deride correctness. And by the way, buses in Germany are late by 3 minutes all the time, and no one complains about it if it's just 3 minutes. But moving on. But more importantly, it is always beside the point. We could replace the term political correctness with decency in all cases, and then we'd see how people make fools of themselves. In some circles, it has become acceptable to believe that it's possible to overdo it with basic things like respect and human rights. Whereas in reality, even a fairly traditional and non-radical handling of these values exposes PC critics as just the antisocial bunch they are. Political correctness is a term that has seeped into the common discourse from the right-wing spectrum and is now used by people who are either right-wing themselves or just repeat what they've heard elsewhere and who are now surprised about their reactions, or who have degenerated so far that they no longer place any importance in differentiating themselves from Nazis. I invite anyone who insists on deriding what is supposedly correct to just come out and say that he doesn't want to treat intersex people as equals, or that he doesn't want his children and grandchildren to have better books to read than they did in the winter of 1946. That would at least be honest.
Yeah, I don't want my grandchildren to have politically correct books. I want my grandchildren to read the books of 1946. Now what?
Probably they're gonna learn more from that. Yeah.
I mean, I guess in Germany applies what applies almost everywhere else, namely that the media people are in a specifically non-pernicious bubble of themselves. Sorry, not non-pernicious, the impenetrable. I mean, the nothing comes in from that in that bubble, and they just haven't noticed that most of everyone else has slower than usual in Germany, but nevertheless, most of the people have moved on from the media bubble, but the media bubble people themselves haven't.
Yeah, and it's absolutely hilarious that it's just completely misunderstood any sort of objection that people have to political correctness.
Yeah.
The part people have a problem with is not the correctness part; it's the political part.
Yeah.
There are certain things which are correct, but which are not considered politically correct. That is the entire problem. And focusing on the part about correctness just completely misses the point. If
Yeah,
I say,
it's intentional disingenuousness.
yeah, that there's certain facts like women are a lot worse than men at sports, or blacks have lower IQ than whites, or things like that, which are correct, but they're not politically correct because it's. And I mean, I can sort of understand the point of view that pointing these things out in a very aggressive and down-putting way is rude, but pointing them out when ignorant people assert the opposite is not indecent. It's just defending the facts.
Yeah, and even pointing them out in a down-putting way. I mean, yeah, it's rude, but it doesn't make them wrong. Not everything that is rude is necessarily wrong.
Yeah, but that's sort of the idea that political correctness is just decency.
Yeah,
Puts forward here. And I mean, sometimes it is indeed, if it is indeed indecent to point at some of these facts in a sort of malicious manner or in a way of putting others down.
That's why they're called hate facts.
Yeah. But they're nevertheless facts, and pointing them out in a neutral manner or in a manner that is sort of reasonable, or especially in pointing them out in situations where someone asserts the opposite, there's nothing wrong with it, or there should not be nothing wrong with that, but it's still not politically correct, which is the whole reason why people have a problem with political correctness.
Yeah. Amazing. As for the oh, by the way, I think this needs to be mentioned, not for me but for the audience. Punch is a sort of drink in the German-speaking world. It's not a physical punch. I'm sure that
it's also a thing in the English-speaking world.
It is. I've only seen it in Austria and in Germany and here, but in the German communities. I haven't seen it in Britain. That's why I wanted to mention.
At least the word exists. I don't know how common that drink is in Britain or anything like that, but
I haven't seen it. So yeah. Anyway, as for the pointing out facts about women and men and whatnot, but there are no definitive women losers or definitive. Well, that's not the narrative that you point out for the rest of the year, Cupcake.
Yeah,
that's one aspect.
Exactly.
And second aspect is, it is topic. It does depend on the topic, doesn't it? I mean, if the topic is homelessness, you keep pointing out how the tragic stories of homeless women. It kind of is relevant to remind you that the overwhelming majority of the homeless people are men. That's not. I mean, even if you think it's rude, I don't give a shit. It's still a fact. Yeah, if it is a topic about, I don't know. Maybe domestic violence, but even there, I mean, even domestic violence. I mean, I don't know the exact numbers for Germany, but in most countries, there is at least a third of the domestic violence victims are men. So it still does matter. I mean, it does matter the topic. If it is a topic that is overwhelmingly women affected, and I think the rape would be such a case in Germany, then yeah, maybe keep interrupting to give you the 10% victims that are male. Maybe that's a bit rude and maybe uncalled for. Maybe. But in most cases, I mean, if the topic is there and if the facts fit, the fact that you're offended doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, and I mean, if it tells us quite a lot that she has to use this special subcategory of sexualized violence, because if you just look at the violence, period, then men are the primary victims.
For sure, yeah.
And yeah, there are some subcategories within violence where women are more likely to be victims. Okay, but so what? It's just cherry picking.
Yeah.
But I also I agree with her that it's not true that to say that the actual victims or the actual losers today are men. I don't think that's the case. I don't think that men in general are that much worse off than women. But I mean, the thing is that the whole feminist movement has not been good for women.
Yeah.
It has given women some sort of legal advantages and so on, but the way the laws are doesn't. If the laws favor you, that doesn't necessarily mean that you actually do better. I mean, just being advantaged is not the same as winning or doing better. If I have to do a 100-meter dash against Usain Bolt and I get a 1 second head start, I'm still going to lose.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean I wasn't advantaged. I mean, at some point I'm going to win if I get that 10-second head start, then I'm going to win. But just this correlation between being advantaged and doing better is quite murky.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, you have these laws that were supposed to help women, but actually don't. And we have this affirmative action laws. We have laws like
the workplace laws, which
leave laws and so on that in some ways protect women, but at a cost. The cost isn't necessarily visible, but women nevertheless pay those costs. And
they either pay it with comparatively lower wages overall, or with assholes like me who are like, are you a woman under 45? Yeah, I'm not going to employ you. Get lost. I don't care about your CV. You're a much higher liability than a man at a similar age. Period. Especially now with the whole hashtag #MeToo nonsense and all the sexual harassment in the workplace bullshit. No, sorry. No.
And anti-discrimination laws being what they are, employers are not going to tell you that they reject you because you're a woman. They're just going to reject you, or maybe they have to invite a certain number of women to interviews, and then they're still going to hire a man. In many cases. Obviously, not all companies do that. Of course, lots of women do get hired, but it is definitely something that businesses have to take into account and do take into account.
Of course they do. I mean, of course, you're not going to see any company, even smaller companies like mine, but even bigger companies, you're not going to see, from now on, we're not going to employ women. But that's exactly what they're doing. And they are taking this into account. And they will forever will, no matter how many laws they pass.
Yeah, in the end, capitalism finds a way.
Oh, of course. Always. It always finds a way. And that's how it should be. Because again, if you ban all discrimination, that means banning discrimination based on abilities, and that's the end of capitalism, and that usually ends up in misery, as it always does. And you can't ban that. So if you cannot ban that, then whatever else you do, there will be a workaround for sure.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move to Scandinavia. This one is a really interesting story. Coming from NRK, incest-accused mother claims it's because of a dead pedophile. An Østfold woman in her 50s is due to appear today in court, charged with sexual assault against her 2 minor sons. She has blamed the matter on a now deceased pedophile man. According to the prosecution, during the summer of 2005, the woman committed various sexual offenses against her 2 minor sons on several occasions. According to the woman's lawyer, Martin Hay, the assaults were committed against her will. She claims that a pedophile man she was with instructed her. Both the victims and the accused have mentioned the person who has given the instructions to the mother to make the children take part in sexual acts. This would have never happened if she had not been taken advantage of, the lawyer said. The pedophile died of illness before the matter occurred. Pedophiles choose weak people who can be manipulated. She was pushed to do things she did not see wrong, says Hay. The sons chose to report the situation after one of the boys in 2014 have told the foster family about what happened in the summer of 2005. The woman admitted the situation in January 2015 and is now charged under the 195th and 197th of the Criminal Code, which is sexual exploitation of a minor and so on. It's not unusual that it takes so long for something going on and until the charges are being brought. One of the boys told about the abuses in the foster home in which he lived, and the case was reported to the Child Welfare Service, says Attorney General Aina Mee outside. This is a serious matter since they were so young and that the abuses were committed by the mother. When the case comes to court today, it has been 3 years since the woman admitted the circumstances. Lawyer Hay says that this time has been a burden on the mother. That the matter has taken so long has been a huge burden for her. She has been unsure of what is happening and has not had any particular contact with her sons. But he tells her mother it's right that the children have reported her and that she does not want the children to suffer further from what has happened. Part of her mental ailments is to know that this has happened. It has been a very heavy and difficult part of life. The trial is said to last 2 days. So,
oh, the poor dear.
Yeah.
A very trying situation for her.
Can you imagine how guilty this cunt is if this is the best the defense attorney can come up with?
That's his dad's guy who was a pedophile. He totally told me to do it.
Yeah, and conveniently, the alleged guilty party is dead, so he cannot defend himself, and he died before she committed these acts. So, are we even sure that guy? That's what it says.
I must have missed that part.
Yeah, it says here the pedophile died of illness before the matter occurred. So, are we even sure that that dude was a pedo? My bet is no. I don't think so.
He instructed her from beyond the grave to rape her sons, something like that.
The only way this can sound credible is that they had some conversations which maybe or might have not had pedo overtones when the guy was still alive, and then some time later he dies of illness, and then several years later she actually puts it into practice. At best, you can argue that she learned that this is possible from that dude, but nevertheless, that dude is not guilty of anything. I mean, he was dead when she was raping her kids. I mean,
that sort of influence is like saying, I read a book that told me that it was all right to rape people or something like that.
Yeah, I read the 180 Days of Sodom, so therefore ban that book. I mean, really? Really?
The Marquis de Sade told me to do it. It's not my fault. Sorry.
Yeah, let's bring Marquis de Sade on trial too. Amazing. And what's even more amazing is that this, I don't think the judges will buy the story, but a significant portion, still a minority, but a significant portion of the public might actually believe it. They're like, oh, the poor lady had a negative influence from the man in her life. And the fact that the dude is dead, I mean, that's very convenient because he cannot defend himself. I mean, we're all now the people who actually know the dude who were around when he was still alive now will have a negative image about that dude, even though that dude might have actually done nothing wrong to anyone ever.
Yeah,
this is how you tarnish the memory. Sorry?
It's quite an insane story.
Yeah, and it's an insane story that has certain side effects, such as tarnishing the memory of potentially good people. I have no idea if that dude was a pedo or not, but considering that he was never convicted of anything, I would presume he wasn't. And since he's not around to defend himself now against such egregious slander, I'm kind of forced to assume that he was a nice dude. Until further evidence. And again, even if he was, he's still not guilty of her raping her son.
Yeah.
Because he died before she did it. So, amazing. But again, can you imagine how guilty she is if that's the best the attorneys could come up with? Amazing. I will be looking forward.
Even if the story is completely true, like, so what?
Yeah.
So he told her to do it. I don't know. How does that excuse anything?
Yeah, and
maybe it would make him also guilty as an accessory to that crime. Okay, of course, yeah. But I mean, he's his dad, so who cares?
Yeah, but then again, the crime occurred after he died. So how could he be guilty? I mean, last time I checked,
if he was alive at the time and someone manipulated her or something.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, but that's not
that
the
case, it wouldn't.
Yeah, even in that case, it wouldn't excuse her actions, but maybe it could have been mitigating circumstance. But again, when the acts were committed, the guy was dead. So even if the entirety of her story is true, that still doesn't change her culpability in the matter. As in, at all. It's neither mitigating nor aggravating.
Yep.
I guess the attorneys are looking at the guilty, but not guilty by reasons of insanity type of argument. No, seriously. I mean, that's a serious concept. Not guilty by reason of temporary insanity.
My dad's pedo friend told me to do it.
Yeah. Basically, that's what I guess that's what they're aiming for. At that time, she was still under the charm of her her late boyfriend, who died and whatnot. And it sounds insane, but I think that's the argument, that the angle that they're aiming for. The defense attorneys, I mean. Because otherwise, why the hell would you come up with such a story? This is amazing. I'll be looking forward to see the sentence handed down on this, because it's wow. Wow. Okay, let's go to the next one. Also coming from NRK, but it's about Iceland. And I'll be leaning on Jon a lot for expert opinion on this. Iceland introduces law on equal pay. It's forbidden to pay men more. Iceland thus becomes the first country in the world to introduce such a law. As of January the 1st, it is illegal in Iceland to pay a man higher wages than a woman who has the same job. The Icelandic law was adopted on March the 8th, 2017. Icelanders hope that the law will remove wage differences between the sexes by 2020, says Swedish SVT. In order to be compliant with the new legislations, companies and government agencies with more than 25 employees must get their wage plan certified by the Icelandic state every 3 years. Those who fail to provide that they give women to prove that they give women and men equal pay can receive fines. Iceland has had laws on equal pay since 1961, but the new standard is seen as the first concrete measure to force companies to eliminate pay differentials. It has always been illegal to pay men and women differently, but this is a legally binding toolbox, says Fridarus Valdimarsdóttir, leader of the Icelandic Association for Women's Rights, to the New York Times, a former newspaper. In 2017, Iceland came first for the 9th consecutive year in the World Economic Forum's Gender Equality Survey. Iceland has the best overall score of 144 countries. Norway is in second. By 2016, women accounted for 48% of the elected representatives of the Icelandic, the parliament, and companies with more than 50 employees have at least 40% of women in the board. We have come a long way, and when it comes to gender equality, we are at the forefront of the world, but we are so far away from achieving equality in Iceland, says Valdimarsdóttir. When the law was passed in 2016, critical voices argued that in order to enforce the new law, new unnecessary bureaucracy for employers needs to be created. They also argued that the wage gap is already on its way to be narrowed via market means. It will be an additional burden for companies to comply with the law, but such burdens are imposed on them all the time, for example, through accounting rules and tax settlements, said former Minister of Education and Social Affairs, Thorstein Viglusson. when the law was adopted on March the 8th. Men earned most in Norway. In Norway, in the autumn of 2017, there was a debate about pay differentials between the sexes in Norwegian sports and the Norwegian national squads in football. It all ended with the fact that the football heroes accepted a wage cut to ensure that women from this year get as much in national wages. In Iceland, men earn more than women in both private and public companies, the municipal administrations. In Norway, men earn more than women in both private and public companies, the municipal administrations, and the state bureaucracy as full-time employees. Figures from the Norwegian Statistical Bureau show. By 2016, full-time women's average monthly salary was 87.5% of men's monthly salary. This despite the fact that women in Norway have a much higher education level than men. So, do explain, Jon.
I'm sorry, I don't really know much about or anything about this law. I don't really follow Icelandic politics in any sort of depth. So I don't know about this particular. Basically, anything I know about this law is from this article. So I'm sorry that I can't contribute much expertise here. But sort of in general, Iceland is compared to the other Nordic countries a bit less heavy in the socialism in general. So it surprises me that they come up with this, seems to be a fairly radical step there. That it actually will achieve equal pay by 2020, I think is quite unlikely.
That's to put it mildly. Yes. Go ahead.
I mean, they could adopt extremely radical measures, but unless they just want to completely overturn the market economy, it's not going to happen. Yeah, and I mean, these measures, they're of course insane, but I don't think they're going to do much in terms of changing supposed disparity in pay.
Yeah, the thing is that, and this is something I always need to remind lefties in particular when they give examples from Iceland that allegedly support their cause. I'm like, dude, the neighborhood I live in has more inhabitants than Iceland. It's just that simple. So it never has to be taken as an example of, oh, we could import that and apply it on a bigger country. No, no, no. So there's that. It's not particularly important. With that said, it is still a step in the very wrong direction to have your wage plan certified by the state in your private company. Are you kidding me, mate? And applies from for companies over 25 employees. What? If I were an Icelander, that by now my company would have been moved to Norway. It's that simple, or to northern Scotland or whatever, somewhere else. What? No, absolutely not. I mean, this is the kind of state intrusion that should not be tolerated. I mean, yeah, sure, the bureaucracies can do whatever they want, preferably dismantle. That would be the best thing they could do. But, having private companies submit their wage plan to the state and get certified from there before they can enforce it? What?
Yeah, it's absolutely insane.
That's Soviet style kind of thing. I mean, in late 1980s in Eastern Europe, particularly Hungary and Romania and Poland to a certain extent, some sort of private companies were starting to be allowed. Especially minuscule companies and very large companies. Pepsi, for instance, had a factory in Romania as early as 1976, I think. And also small companies were allowed up to 50 or 60 employees. And it was exactly the same thing. You would have to submit your wage plan to the state to get certified before you would be allowed to proceed. This is Soviet-style thinking. It's insane. And you're telling me that Iceland is not so much on the socialist? Are you sure? You sure, mate? Because it sure sounds like reading the news from Pravda. To me, amazing. All right, speaking of the mental disorders, let's get to the last one.
Okay, coming from the Telegraph, another UK piece. Okay, it's not actually about
Not
the
really.
UK, not really, but from a UK source. This is half a lie. Gaming addiction is said to be recognized as a mental health disorder. Those who play video games compulsively for long periods of time may be diagnosed with a mental health disorder. The World Health Organization, the WHO, has for the first time included gaming disorder in its list of mental health conditions in a draft of its 11th International Classification of Disease Guidelines, which will be published in 2018. The WHO characterized gaming disorder as a pattern of persistent or recurrent gaming behavior, both on or offline. Notable traits include patients prioritizing gaming over life interests and daily activities, and continuation or escalation of gaming despite the occurrence of negative consequences. Patients must have shown symptoms for at least a year before diagnosis, although the guidance states that this is subject to change depending on the severity of the case. The guidelines form the basis for identification of health trends and statistics globally and are the international standard for reporting diseases and health conditions. They are used by medical practitioners, including doctors and nurses in the 100 countries where WHO is recognized, to diagnose conditions and by researchers to categorize conditions. The inclusion of a disorder can shape national healthcare budgets and insurance policies. This means that in the future, treatment for gaming disorders could be funded by the National Health Service, although there's not yet any guidance drawn up on how to treat this particular condition. There are several private organizations that offer gaming addiction therapy, including UK Addiction Treatment Centre, which also provides treatment for alcohol, gambling, and substance abuse. Quote, it's very interesting to see that the WHO are adding gaming disorder as a mental health condition as of 2018, a spokesman for the UK Addiction Treatment Centre told the Telegraph. What we have seen at the UK Addiction Treatment Centre already is a 300% rise in the amount of admissions where gaming addiction is part of the reason for treatment since 2014. It has treated 36 inpatients for gaming addiction since 2014. Use of the internet, computers, smartphones, and other electronic devices has dramatically increased over recent decades, said Gregory Hartle, a spokesman for the WHO. While the increase is associated with clear benefits to users, for example, in real-time information exchange, health problems as a result of excessive use have also been documented. Mr. Hartle added that in a number of countries, the problem has become a significant public health concern.
All right. I have a confession to make. It says here that it has to be a disorder if it's only after a year. Okay, I've been doing this show for almost 5 years now. It will soon be March 2018, so it'll be 5 years. And I have to confess, whenever the co-host is reading an article that I already know what is going to be about, I'm playing solitaire or hearts or free cell, and I have accumulated quite a high score. Does that count as a game addiction disorder? And it says here, in spite of incurring negative consequences. Yeah, sometimes I miss one or two phrases, and for half a second I sound like I don't know what I'm talking about until I read again the phrase. So yeah, that's a negative consequence, but I still play the game.
But given how infrequent the show has been in the last while, it's not a pattern of persistent or recurrent gaming behavior, so I think you're on the safe side.
Yeah, but while I'm rendering the videos, I'm also playing solitaire.
Oh, yeah, then I think you're.
I'm on the dangerous side, right? As for this,
maybe consult the NHS professionals for guidance.
Yeah. If I want to scam the British taxpayer, I should scam them for something serious. I'm just saying. I mean, having the British taxpayer pay for this is just insane. As for this individual, the spokesman for the WHO, George Hartle, has such a villain name, Gregory Hartle, sorry. The use of smartphones and other electronic devices has dramatically increased over recent decades. Mate, the smartphone is not yet a decade old. Or is it? It's exactly 1 decade old.
The first Blackberries, aren't they a bit older than a decade? I don't know.
2007, 2008, 2009, something like that. So a decade.
That recent? Yeah.
Yeah. In 2005, it was still the the kind of phone that I still use today because I refuse to use smartphones. So yeah, the smartphone is still not a decade old, or at best a decade old. So that's one aspect. Secondly, this individual from the UCAT, Addiction Treatment Center, they say, oh, we've seen a 300% increase in amount of admissions. Yeah, you've treated 36 people in total in the last 4 years. So yeah, maybe the first year you had 3 people, and then you had 10, and then by 2017 you had 30. So yeah, I guess it's a 300% increase, but it's
in a country of, I don't know, what is it, 50 million or something, it's now 60 million.
Yeah. In a country of 60 million, 36 inpatients for gaming addiction in 4 years. Yeah, that we have a name for that. It's called statistical zero. As for the whole idea itself, no, it's just nonsense. Admittedly, I can. I'm not a big friend of gamers in general. I think gaming past the age of 25 is especially I guess we could call it compulsive gaming, is a bit weird. But on the other hand, a mental disorder, give me a freaking break. I mean, people have hobbies, and not all people have to have the hobbies that I have. Not all the people have to do what I do, or what quote unquote normal people do, or most of the people do. There's nothing wrong with that. And even if there are negative consequences, I mean, compared to gambling, for instance, I think gamers are preferable.
Yeah, I mean, this definition, life interest in daily activities, and
what's that?
A pattern of persistent or recurrent behavior that's like a hobby, for example, like I don't know. Pattern of persistent behavior. I mean, there's also a pattern of persistent behavior where I eat food, something like 4 times a day, and if I haven't eaten recently, I feel a sort of queasy feeling in my stomach, and after a while my hands start to shake with the withdrawal symptoms. So clearly I'm addicted to food.
Yeah, it's even worse with water. I'm telling you. I mean, after going into the Persian desert in Armenia, I'm telling you, it's the water addiction is real, mate, and the withdrawal symptoms are not particularly great.
In fact, I actually drank water several times while doing the show. In the last few hours, it's amazing.
Amazing.
I have a problem.
Yeah, you do have a problem. You should contact the WHO on that. No, this whole thing is brutal insanity. And again, this comes from the exact same institution that told us that giving hormones to 9-year-olds because they might want to change sex is not a mental disorder. It's just normal. This comes from the exact same institution who told us that genitally mutilating our infant boys is okay and even potentially beneficial. I mean, it is the WHO in the end who spread the lie that male genital mutilation somehow curbs HIV, which is as far from the truth as it could possibly be. I mean, this is the exact same institution. Let's not forget, this is not the first time when the WHO spews brutal insanity. And I guess it kind of begs the question, how much longer are we going to take WHO seriously on anything? I mean, if they're willing to lie like this, what else they're lying about?
Yeah, when I read these kinds of news stories, I'm getting ever more sympathetic to the view of Thomas Saz, who's sort of a critic of psychiatry, who says that the whole idea of mental illness is so ill-defined that we should sort of banish that whole idea, and the whole idea of addiction is sort of fishy. We should just think of it as maybe like an extreme preference. I'm not fully convinced of that view, but whenever I read a story like this, I'm getting more convinced.
Yeah, you're not entirely convinced, but the WHO is working on that.
It'll keep going as long as we continue to fund it and continue to throw our funds
and
grants to these outrageous studies. As long as governments keep funding that, it's going to keep going.
And as long as governments will take them seriously, because if there will be enough, and not just governments, but private organizations as well, where like, yeah, something is harmful. Who says that? The WHO and who else? Oh, nobody else? Okay, then that means it's automatically bullshit, and we're going to disregard it. If that were to happen a lot more often, soon enough, you're going to see a shrinking in this nonsense. But yeah, James has a point. If we keep on funding it, we're going to keep on getting more of this brutal insanity. Amazing. Amazing. All right. And with all that said, we've managed to get through the entirety of the news section almost on time. I believe Jon has one more thing to say.
Yes, I think a no show next week, but then the week after that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And orthogonalideas.com. Check it out. It's my blog. And take the red pill. Goodbye.
Take the red pill. Goodbye, everyone.